So the questions are going to be on the topic of racism, and the first question is,
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
the first question is, what?
You guys can sit down if you want.
Do
Or
you want
are
me to
you
go? Do you
allowed
want me
to
to
for
talk,
your?
like, talk loud?
What is your definition of racism?
Racism seems to me to be an intentional way of negatively treating people for their race, you know, or well, at least their perceived race, you know, because there are many circumstances of not of you know genetic mutations that cause skin tones to be different from parents.
And have you experienced or seen racism here in your hometown?
Here in WSU, in my hometown, not really.
And the next question is, do you think groups like Black Lives Matter or like any group that's trying to raise awareness of minorities being treated unfairly by either police brutality or by other people, is that going to help like eradicate racism or at least bring more awareness to like stop people from?
Can I ask what is defined as police brutality?
So people being treated unfairly by police.
Can I ask what you mean by unfairly? Because in law enforcement, response is predicated, or response is, sorry, not predicated, set by a subject. So let's say somebody gets pulled over, right? If it's a cordial stop, it's going to continue to be a cordial stop. If it continues to be a cordial stop and the driver is a felon who has felony warrants out, it's going to continue to be a cordial stop. Law enforcement is designed to match level of aggression and, well, not just match, but do what they can to remain in control. And so a lot of instances of what's considered police brutality is just an appropriate response. That being said, raising awareness of racism is totally different from race baiting. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
Yeah. So where I believe that there are good people who have good intentions saying, you know what, we need to treat people the same no matter what, I don't agree that all groups who say that allow or express themselves in that healthy way. Does that make sense?
A little bit, yeah.
No, that's okay. So, can you repeat the question? I'll ask you to repeat the question.
So it was
What class is this for?
for a University 104 class.
Cool. Exciting.
So one of the questions, I combined three questions. So the first one was, what are your thoughts on the movement Black Lives Matter? And do you think that rallies and people speaking more about racism is going to change anything? Why or why not?
Gotcha. Okay, so you tried to combine two, and I just didn't respond well. So, what do I think of the movement Black Lives Matter? I think it's an unfair movement because specifying that one life matters more than another seems to me that it would be an unfair thing. And so, because I think all lives matter. So be it black, white, blue, red, puppy dog, kitty cat, all lives matter. And when a group is victimized by an overpowering entity, then it becomes an issue. And that's an issue that we shouldn't stand for, regardless of who the overpowering entity is and who the victim is. Because ultimately, we would rather have a peaceful solution than a violent solution. Are we agreed on that?
I feel like if you say all lives matter, it takes away from the people the minorities that are there. Because Black Lives Matter is focusing not just on Black lives, but other minorities. And they also speak on non-people of color who have been hurt by police brutality. So I feel like saying all lives matter kind of takes away from the people who are suffering, personally.
If we say all lives matter, it takes away from focusing on the issue, then you're absolutely right. I guess the next question logically would be, is the issue that they're trying to raise awareness about legitimate? And some say yes, some say no. I haven't done a lot of research on it, but my immediate response is that all lives matter, even if it dilutes their message, right? Even if it dilutes their message, it rings more true. Because can we really say that there are some lives that matter less than others?
It seems like minorities' lives matter less than others. Because as a minority, I feel like I don't matter as much, and like I was taught not to trust the police because people in my family or other people around, we've been told, although we don't know the whole story, what we've been taught is the cops are bad, and we feel like they're not going to protect us. So I feel like we are like put down, and I feel like.
So may I ask you who taught that?
My parents.
Did the police come to you and say, by the way, we're going to treat you like your life matters less than everybody else's? So you could say that if you're taught that, and if your parents were taught that by their parents, we could even say that there's a cycle going on of treating other parties with distrust. When we breed distrust, we're going to have serious issues through generations. You've heard of Hatfields and McCoy, and the McCoys. It's just a story of a family dispute that gets out of hand and affects generations. Trying to remember what it's called. Anyways, there's a word for it. It's basically the concept of Romeo's family hated Juliet's family, and it perpetuated the entire family, and that distrust ended up with various characters killed. And with Romeo and Juliet, who were not guilty of anything except to love each other, it caused them to both lose their lives because of the hatred that the families had towards each other, and the distrust. And so I would say if a cop ever comes to you and says that your life matters less than somebody else's, that he should be fired. Whereas if your parents told you that, I would argue the point that perhaps, and just perhaps, they're wrong. Does that make sense? So I think the important thing to getting rid of bias is to act cordially no matter what, and understand the other role that the other person is trying to fulfill. As a law enforcement officer, when you roll up on somebody, like a traffic stop, you have no idea what's going to happen, because you've had soccer moms who are just crying their eyes out, don't want that ticket, or are running late, or you have drug dealers who the second you walk up are going to shoot you. And this happens. I mean, it's not like these violent people care what color you are. They want to hurt the law enforcement officer or something like that. And it doesn't matter who's being pulled over. I mean, there are drug dealers who have it out for you. There are what are they called? Not anarchists, but sovereign citizens. They go by sovereign citizens. Have you guys heard of them? They cause big issues. A lot of them, a disproportionately high percentage of them turn violent immediately towards police. I would just recommend that we respect the other role the other person is trying to fulfill. When it comes to law enforcement, firefighters, and ambulance, it's public safety, right? And they don't care who's hurt. The police control the scene. The firefighters, they take care of hazards, and the ambulance, they heal. And they take who they can to the hospital, right? And so on those videos where you see cops shoot somebody and then they don't go up, it's because their job is to secure the scene for the ambulance, and if there's gas leaking or electrical, secure it for fire. Once they can see that the threat is no longer present, they can go up and detain an individual and assess that he or she is safe to approach and receive treatment, because they don't know what they're going up against and what's going on. So I think a lot of issues come from not understanding the role that the other person is trying to fulfill. There are people who let power go to their head, and that needs to be taken care of. Absolutely. So that answered your first question, Black Lives Matter, is that right?
Yeah, answered both of them.
Oh, that answered
Yeah.
both of them?
Yeah.
Were there more questions?
No, I think that's all.
Okay. I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to keep
Yeah.
talking.